left, right.
Do you ever feel some days like it's all going to shit? What's the future looking like? It's not looking bright? Well, that's the general feeling of this topic. So if you're not ready for it, maybe skip this episode. I don't think we get too bad, but we definitely air our frustrations with the direction of things. So if you are interested, listen on. Let me know if you agree. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Crisis film.
Cheers.
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 All right, we are live. This is SipTalk podcast, episode 242. My name is Justin DiGiulio out of my office here in New Jersey, joined by James, the Bosnator Boswell, philosopher, philanderer, philanthropist, PhD, a man of many PHs, out of his bedroom in sunny South Carolina with a black light in the background, the bathroom. We've established it's an active crime scene. But we're monitoring it live. I'm glad we have a straight shot of your bathroom here on the live podcast. So we got a pretty cool topic today. I don't think we're going to enjoy this conversation one bit on either side of this. So
I'm going to try and make it as unenjoyable for you as possible.
Either way, episode 242. I enjoyed the last couple of episodes, except last episode we forgot the bar trivia question. We answered previous weeks. We didn't have one. So do not let that slip my mind. This episode, I have a pretty good one, I think. I think you're going to like it. And I think our listener is going to like it. So if today's listener shows back up ever again. So where are we going to start here? Basically, you shared with me like a month ago how you were just feeling pretty disillusioned and pretty frustrated with kind of the direction things were headed in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't on it that day. I wasn't feeling that. I wasn't feeling that vibe. I didn't think I could talk about it. And then it happened to me recently. I saw some legislation coming through, a settlement that came through, and I just said, we're just heading in a real bad direction, and I don't think I have any control over it. And here we are today having this conversation. So my question to you is, where do we start in all this? We're both frustrated with the government. We're frustrated with the country.
Let's start with what got you thinking about this, because it's actually an opportunity for you to teach me something, and then I can weigh in.
Thank you. Thank you for the generous opportunity.
Whoa. Yeah. So this is about the National Association of Realtors having it was a class action settlement, correct?
Yeah. So let me back it up. Sorry, I talked about this a lot this morning. I've been talking literally all day, nonstop. I started with teaching a class, and literally the first subject we covered was this. So effectively, what a group is saying, that's a class action group. I don't know how big it is. I'm not super familiar with this. I haven't read much on the lawsuit. I'm basically just getting social media's reaction to it. In New York City, we are not realtors. We are real estate agents. There's a difference. Realtors must belong to effectively a union called the National Association of Realtors, which you must pay into, and then you get access to an MLS, whatever your region's MLS is. MLS is multiple listing service. So you have regional access to listings. Now, that means you don't have access all over the place to every listing. You just have regional access. And then you have to pay $500 or $600 a year to the realtor group. Now, what the group is alleging was that the commissions were unclear and that it wasn't transparent and people were being duped into paying a commission. So the way that it works is if you buy a $1 million home, and let's say, because there's no set commission, there's a lot of super low-cost brokers out there that'll do it for a percentage or two. There's some brokers that want 10% commission, depending on the market, depending on those brokers, and depending on how busy they are. If they have lots of listings, they may say, hey, if you want to list with me, I want 10%, take it or leave it. But generally, what you see and what most people expect is 5 or 6% commission. Okay, so if it's $1 million home, that's $60,000. So the way that it works is the seller pays the commission effectively, right? Out of the sale price. The money comes from the sale price. You follow me so far?
Yeah, this is so far. This is what I know. What I don't understand is what was alleged in the lawsuit, what the terms of the settlement were, and what the implications are.
The thing is for you and I, we got to get everybody on the same page. And as I build the argument, as we ascend the staircase of the discussion, we got to make sure stair per stair we're on the same page. So you understand that $60,000 comes out of the sale price, compensates the brokers. So
and generally, the buyer doesn't pay a commission to real estate agents. The buyer is just paying for the house.
You're 3 steps up.
Oh, okay.
And you'll see why in a second. So $60,000. The seller's agent lists the house, and if he sells it to a consumer, he gets the full $60,000. Now, if a buyer comes along and has a broker, which is generally a good idea, because then you're not negotiating with the seller's broker only. If you are the buyer, you have someone brokering on your behalf. That broker will get half the commission, so he'll get 3%. And again, these numbers are variable, okay, but generally it's 3%, and that comes out of the final purchase price, so $30,000. And legally, because the seller is paying, right? The seller is supposed to pay his broker. So say that's Keller Williams, and then Keller Williams gets $30,000. And let's say they give a 50-50 split with the agent gets paid by Keller Williams $15,000. And then the buyer's broker gets paid the $30,000. Let's say that's Remax. And then they pay their agent half of that. So the agent makes $15,000. You on the same page?
Okay.
So what's happened is when you, the buyer, show up to the closing table, you prepare the checks. Oftentimes what happens is you have one check for the seller's broker. Well, you have a check for 900. So for easy numbers, we'll go with the numbers we're using, $940,000. That goes to the seller. You got a check for $30,000 that goes to Keller Williams, and you got a check for $30,000 that goes to Remax. And then those brokers will pay their agents. So who actually paid the brokers?
The seller.
No. You got the checks. You're the buyer. You showed up to the closing table with the checks.
Yeah, but I'm an accountant, so I'm saying the seller.
Yeah, as is everybody else. However, basically what they're saying is there's a lack of transparency. We don't know who's getting what. It's not fair for the seller or the buyer. And now the lawsuit alleges that people were duped, and $418 million is due on overpaid commission to whatever class action settlement group.
So one of the things I read in summaries about this is that it's going to result in a restructuring of the way real estate agent commissions are paid.
What they're saying is that the seller's broker cannot advertise a buyer's broker commission in the listing. And we don't know how it's going to play out yet. But what most people are thinking is that buyer brokers, if someone uses a buyer's broker, so if you're trying to buy a house, you either have to go directly to the seller or the seller's agent and negotiate with them, or hire a buyer's broker at your own expense, adding to the purchase cost. And since that's not part of the property value, you would have to pay that out of pocket, which could potentially mess up your financing.
So one potential implication, and I'm asking this genuinely not knowing, would be if I'm a buyer,
I think
I was a couple years ago.
Okay.
I didn't pay my real estate agent directly. Like,
you didn't pay the agent, you paid the brokerage.
I didn't pay anything to my agent. He got paid from the seller. Like, I didn't have it. There was no I didn't pay any commission on my sale. And so if I had to pay a commission to the buyer, then the buyer's broker, then one of the things that I would have mentioned during the negotiations of the house price and I would have directly asked the seller's broker. I would have said, "What is your commission on this?" Because if I'm paying, let's say, 3% to my broker, and the seller's broker is getting, say, 6%, I would say, you're going to need to renegotiate that because, like, and so I would imagine that, like, this is really that one possible result is just a shifting of the costs, but
So,
not
well,
really a change. Because, like, if,
but
yeah,
here's what happens: is nobody's going to want to hire a broker when you're buying, okay? Which basically forces the seller's agent into a role of dual agent, meaning that their confidentiality and loyalty could be compromised because they're effectively representing both sides of the transaction. But no buyer is going to want to pay an additional 3%.
and most buyers are not going to want to be represented by somebody that's a dual agent.
No,
It's legal, but it has to be
it's
disclosed.
not legal in every state,
Well,
and
okay,
it
well,
does
it's legal here.
and per New York and New Jersey, it does need to be disclosed. So that's kind of the basis. Okay, is we don't know what's going to happen when this actually goes into effect, or June or July. But so we don't know how buyers and sellers are going to respond. We don't. So I heard somebody calling a buyer the other day saying, "By the way, you have to pay my commission." I eavesdropped on the call, and then afterwards I said, "How was that?" And she said, "Fine." We don't know how it'll play out if they see homes and they like them. But here's the other issue. So
Honestly, if I were an agent, I wouldn't be talking about this with borrowers or with buyers or sellers yet until I had a better idea as to what's going
exactly.
to play out. Like,
So
why
well,
give information that could potentially be wrong and also put off a
but
potential
we don't know what's
client?
going to happen. So here we got this issue where you have a potential dual agent. But the way that I look at it is this could potentially eliminate all the agents who represent buyers and have for decades saying, "Hey, my services are free. I negotiate on your behalf," and that's the way the industry is. All those jobs are eliminated.
I don't
So,
think that's going to happen though.
well,
That
I don't
that's
necessarily think
too
it is
big of
either.
a labor force to just say that
But here's
you
what
would just
happened:
expect to pack
their
it in.
their union that represents them settled, and this is the potential outcome. This is what everybody thinks the outcome is going to be. So the question is, you got this National Association of Realtors. The way that most agents look at the National Association of Realtors is, what the hell do they do for me? I am forced into this union. I'm forced to pay these big dues. Okay. They don't do anything for me. Okay. The MLS doesn't have much more on it than Zillow does. Okay. And
Honestly, at
then
this point, Zillow functions like a nationwide MLS.
exactly. And then all we really hear from the National Association of Realtors is, now you can't use the word family in your listing. Now you can't use the word his or hers in your listing. And they're just constantly like attacking agents in their supposedly defending the agents, but saying, "Hey, you can't do this." And it's just kind of silly because they're kind of jumping the gun on all these uh, liberal issues is what it feels like. But the moment they have an opportunity to really have agents' backs, they just drop the ball. So there's that aspect. Why? How did this giant organization drop the ball? That's one
Well,
question.
I mean, it sounds like they
The
lost
other,
in court, so it's a question, like, did they
no,
really drop the ball if they had
this
a
is
court
settlement.
judgment against them?
This is a settlement. It's not a judgment. This is a settlement. So my
Yeah, but
question is, why were
why do
you?
you settle? Why would you ever settle it?
Because you think you're going to lose.
Correct.
And but now, when we already established that when you buy a home, you assume that the seller's agent is splitting the commission with the buyer's agent. Everybody knows that. And
Mhm.
the argument is about transparency. And I
Well,
don't think that I don't think that there was that much transparency lacking. But hear me out, because I want to get somewhere else. That I want to move on to other impending doom.
okay.
So the National Association of Realtors, this huge organization, which every agent in pretty much every market has to pay $500 or $600 a year to. Okay, they dropped the ball here, and that's their only job, is to protect agents. And usually, what they do is just harass agents for language use. That's one part. Now, do you know how Zillow and Realtor.com? Do you know how they make money? The lion's share of their revenue.
Listing fees? Like, they charge to have a
But
property.
they don't charge to have a property on their website. Only in the New York City market, and that's for one website. But the most markets, they don't charge you to have them on there. New York City, it's $7 a day to list on a website called Street Easy, which is owned by Zillow.
Okay.
But
So,
in
okay.
New Jersey, any other markets, when you list something, you don't pay per day. Now, what happens is agents will buy a zip code. All right. So maybe whatever your zip code is, maybe there's 3 agents, and Zillow will say, you know what, there's high property values in this zip code, so it's in high demand, or maybe there's lots of sales in the zip code. That's how they establish the value. But it usually ranges anywhere from $400 to like $2,000 a zip code, and there could be multiple agents on a zip code.
Okay.
All right. Now, when you, the buyer, are searching for properties and you contact a property, what happens is you think you're contacting the seller or the seller's agent, but you're actually contacting one of the agents that pays for that zip code, and they're certified buyer's agents. Now, when you contact them, there could be 7,000 properties for sale in that zip code. They don't know every single one, and the vast majority of the time, they have no idea about the listing you're calling them about. But you call them, they say, hey, I'll represent you. And
So basically, agents are paying Zillow effectively as a lead generator.
Correct. But they're paying loads of money, and it's all on the buyer side. So my question is, Zillow and Realtor.com, which are the biggest real estate behemoths, okay, arguably monopolies, these guys get the majority of their income from buyers agents, and they didn't back up the National Association of Realtors on this, because I feel like they have some major skin in the game.
The only thing that I'm going to say is I'm going to keep on coming back to this is you might want to back somebody as much as you can, but if you look at the case in front of you and say we're on your side, but it's a losing side.
Yeah, but again, I think it's pretty cut and dry. Everybody knows how realtors are paid. They know the basic split. And most of the general public, not realtors, not real estate agents, most of the general public consider that when they talk about commissions, they say, oh, yeah, the standard 6%.
Right.
We're told not even to use standards and to ask for what we feel like,
But here's the thing is like the argument of everybody already knows about that, it's common knowledge, is not a winning legal argument.
Well,
it's persuasive, but the thing is,
you could do surveys on these things.
That's still not persuasive. It on a legal front, it might be persuasive in terms of just an emotional or logical response, but you have to remember that in court there's going to be specific rules about what must be proven, and everybody's familiar with this,
Well, no,
is not generally going to win you a legal case.
If you have surveys, that's actual data.
Right, but again,
large enough sample size, which is the entire country. Okay.
I get it, but I'm saying that if you've got lawyers that know more about this than you and me combined, that decided to settle this case, that tells me that they had a weak case.
But to me, it does. And I don't, somebody who's got skin in the game, who's paying attention to this stuff, I can't really see how you would have a weak case. But look, there's something else I want to talk about. I want to move on.
Talk about the rental thing.
So the evictions. All right. So it's funny because I happen to be on Twitter and I belong to a lot of tenants advocate groups. And I saw a tenants advocate group they were marching through the Capitol of New York, the Albany, big Albany, really nice buildings. But these guys did not look well put together. They looked like they'd been bussed in. I couldn't understand what they were saying. It looked like a mess. And there was probably like 40, 50, 60 people all chanting something. I couldn't figure out what it was. Their signs looked like crap. And it hit me that this tenants advocate group, this is how laws are made now. You got a super loud group of 40, 50, 60 people, and they are a very small minority of public opinion, but they're just loud. And this is what gets attention. This is what gets media headlines. And this is what gets legislation written.
I disagree.
And we spend a lot less time having, and even when there are votes, most people aren't voting. People aren't aware of what's on the agenda. And I've seen a lot of super liberal laws. And we've also seen some pretty conservative laws like the abortion law, okay, that are happening based off a minority's very loud opinion.
Well, all right.
I don't think that's, but we're going to get there in a second. So, but here, that's something that pissed me off, because I see that the laws that are coming through in New York State that are supposed to be protecting tenants, and they're getting a bit extreme, and it's been
Give me an example of a clause that's extreme.
okay. So how about you can no longer check someone's criminal history when you rent them an apartment? How about you can no longer check someone's eviction history when you rent them an apartment? How about the story that I told you about, the topic that I wanted to talk about just now, a woman whose mother passed away. She went to secure the mother's house. The mother hadn't been living there for a couple of weeks because she's dead, and thought that somebody had been in the home, so she changed the locks. Police showed up and arrested her because there was a squatter, and the squatter claimed to be a tenant, and she went to jail. I'm
So
sure she's probably out of jail by now, but the fact that changing locks on a squatter is illegal to me is wild.
so I've got two thoughts on this. One is that the whole notion of squatters is really weird, and like doesn't make a lot of legal sense to me. But on the other side, I have limited sympathy for her, and here's why. If you were so inattentive up to this property that somebody was able to break in and start living there and really establish themselves in some meaningful way, then that's a really significant dereliction of responsibility that you have to that property.
Interesting perspective. Now frame it like this. Your mom died. You spent 2 weeks dealing with her funeral arrangements, consoling family, and also fucking being in grief. And then you went to secure her estate and somebody appeared, had been living there. So being an attentive human being, you went to the Home Depot, bought some new locks, came back, went to change them, and somebody called the police. Because that sounds more likely to me than the fact that you have no idea what's going on. You're such a lucky person. You just inherited a home, which probably you didn't fucking inherit. It probably belongs to other siblings. You're going to have to sell the house because you can't upkeep the cost of taxes and upkeep of the home. So now you're burdened with this property, and now you're going to jail because your first step was, hey, let me secure this place.
So, okay, I would also think that there would be a considerable amount of legal defenses available to her based on the facts and circumstances of this specific instance, because the law that you're referencing in terms of like a landlord trying to like get someone to leave an apartment without actually having to file an eviction, and so one of the ways that they would do that would just be like change the locks and lock this person out of the place. Like I'm actually in favor of that as a tenant protection. That makes complete sense to me. This
So,
sounds to
but
me like a misapplication of a good law.
but also trying to do an eviction in New York State could take you 8 months to a year and a half.
That's irrelevant to my point.
Well, what I'm
No,
saying
it's
is that
completely irrelevant to my point. My point is that having laws to prevent landlords from constructively evicting somebody without going through the legal process are good laws. You want to talk about how the eviction process is inefficient and onerous, that's a separate discussion, which
well,
I'm open to.
that's
However,
that's hold on. That's kind of the whole reason we're having this conversation is that, yes, having laws to prevent constructive eviction, good idea. But when you're looking at spending 16 months doing an eviction as the only alternative, that's potentially even worse. So,
two separate points though.
but here's what I'm saying is that we have a whole bunch of laws that are garbage, and we keep making more garbage laws. We're making laws. So the way that I look at it is our country needs to operate like an orchestra. All right. We have to have everything needs to flow together really well. You can't just put everything on trumpets and say, you know what, we're going to have a great song. You can't put everything on the drums or everything on the tambourine
Okay, look,
and say we're going to have a
I
good
want to
song.
finish this discussion.
When we focus on only one group, we don't look at the greater picture. Banning constructive eviction, good idea. Okay. Having a due process before you're evicted, good idea. But in this case, neither one of them fits the situation, and those are the only two options that you have.
Tayrock says in the eviction story there was no explicit establishment of the tenant in question and the owner. Well, and that gets to the what determines a squatter? When does a squatter have rights? And I would say, and I'm going to come back to, like, in the case of this woman getting arrested for changing the locks, like, if she genuinely didn't know that there was somebody staying in there, that sounds to me like a pretty easy defense. And if I were her, I would be asking for a jury trial. And I would fight these charges because the law was misapplied in spirit. And she could say, I didn't realize there was someone living there. Now that I know, I'll have to do different things. I'm not happy about that. But, like, in order to violate constructive eviction laws, I must know that I am in the position of being a landlord. I don't satisfy that first requirement. Therefore, this law can't apply to me. Now that I know this, now that I know that I am a tenant, or now that I know that I might be a landlord, now that I know that I might be a landlord, I can deal with fighting that one and say, like, hey, this squatter shouldn't be here, and I can have that fight. But I know that while that's being litigated, I know that these laws now apply to me and I will obey them. And I don't think a jury's going to convict her. In fact, I would bet large sums of money that they wouldn't. So
Well,
it's a
sure.
temporary
What's
unfairness,
happening?
and it's a misapplication of the law.
But what's happening to the squatter the entire time? They're just getting to live there, and now they're
Well,
establishing tenancy, and now you have to go
again,
through the
this is
eviction process.
we're
And what I'm
mixing.
saying, the point and the whole topic that I'm bringing up here is that we have bad laws. We
Okay,
have
but
bad
again,
laws, and we have a bad process. And
we need to
we're not-
focus on one thing at a time. Do you agree with my assessment on her getting arrested for changing the locks being easily challengeable in court?
and winning, yeah, of course, I
Okay,
think she would win that.
okay, so we agree there.
Not of course, but I think there's a very good chance. I'm
Okay,
sorry, it
so
was a bit of
it's unfortunate that something like this happened to her, and it's a mistake on a variety of different levels, and, like, notably, like, the police and the court system for allowing her to get arrested in the first place. But overall, the law itself is not to blame. It's the people who executed it poorly. Now, when it comes to squatters, that's a separate argument entirely that I don't want to really address because I don't know enough about it, but I can at least empathize with the position that squatters have too many rights and squatter rights laws can be problematic. So I don't want because we've got so
no,
much more to talk about than
that's what I
this.
was just going to say. Let's move on because you have a bit of an agenda you want to cover, and I
I
want
do.
to kind of incorporate some other stories into there. But that's what got me on this is
Yeah.
these couple of things, and me just saying, God, like if this is fucking what it's like to be a landlord, which I know it's already bad. But you asked me for some examples of bad laws. I think I gave you.
Yeah. And
All right, so let's move on. Where do you want to start
so
on this?
I want to talk. I mean, in terms of the like impending sense of dread in this country, in terms of where we are headed, and where does that come from? And I think right now, at this moment in the country, is in probably the last 30 or 40 years, because I would argue, like, the civil rights era, like the 60s, we were probably more divided than we are today.
Yeah, over even
So
civil topic,
I'll
but
say 50 in the past 50 years, we're the most divided we have been since the mid 60s. Would you agree with that?
I'm all for that. Yeah.
Okay. And it's that conservative and liberal positions have diverged, and I would argue that the conservative positions have moved farther to the right than the liberal positions have. Like, from center, if you measure from center, conservatives have moved farther to the right than liberals have moved farther to the left.
So I would argue against that. I think the liberals have also moved very far to the left, which is why on the if Trump is running Republican, which he is, he's most likely going to win. Whereas if Biden's running for Democrat, there's a really good chance he won't win because the liberal end of the
So you're talking about, like, imagine
as
we had a
fractions
fresh
off.
primary. Imagine both of these people were not not incumbents, or like this was a complete open primary where
No, that's not exactly what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that I would actually argue that the Republicans are more united on their side. I know you think that the crazy conservatives are that crazy and the crazy liberals aren't that crazy. But what I'm telling you is the liberals have actually lost a lot of support because they are as crazy. So the lawsuit, what I heard in the news today in Manhattan is that the school districts or something like that for Manhattan County, for New York County, decided that they weren't going to allow transgender women to compete in women's sports. And the liberal argument would be, well, that's not fair because transgender 13-year-old girls and 15-year-old girls should be able to compete against biological 15-year-old girls.
I don't want to get into this argument. Not because it's not meritorious, but
But
because the
but that's what I'm
argument
saying
about
is that even on the liberal side, even on the Democratic side, what's happening is you're having a lot of disagreement in that. Whereas on the Republican side, banning abortion, most Republicans agree with that.
depends.
A greater majority of Republicans agree on that than the percentage of liberals that agree that transgender women should be able to compete in women's sports.
Yeah, but one
And
of
I'm
those
sure
is
I
a
can
real
find,
issue and one of them isn't.
well, one of them, they're both real issues. One's
No,
happening right now in Manhattan, okay, and one's happening right now
right.
across
And what
the
I'm
country.
saying is that, like,
And I'm sure it's not just happening
trans
in Manhattan.
women participating in sports is a giant distraction, whereas reproductive rights for women is
It's no,
is
it's you look at it as a distraction because you don't have skin in the game. But those transgender women and transgender people do have skin in the game,
right.
and
But
it is a and
they're
as
very
far as
small.
their perspective is concerned, this is an ever-consuming life issue.
That's
Just as much
right.
as
But
somebody
what
just as
I'm
much as
saying is
somebody
that
who's basically
conservatives don't have skin in the game either. I don't have skin in the game when it comes to trans, and the vast majority of conservatives and the vast majority of liberals don't have skin in the game either. Whereas reproductive rights, practically everybody has skin in the game.
but one is fractioning a liberals, and the other one
Well,
is bringing
this is
together
well,
Republicans.
I mean, yeah, because like liberals are pretty well united on the issue of abortion, and conservatives are pretty well united on the issue of trans people. And I would say that, like, if I had to pick a winning issue to run on, I'm going to pick the one that applies to most people.
Well,
Whereas,
the one that applies to most people agree that there should be pro-choice. I think
right,
it's like 70%
it's
of the
between
population.
65 and 70%.
Yeah, so 65, 70% of the US population are pro-choice. End of story. Whether you agree with it or not, survey after survey shows 65 to 70%. Whereas the others, okay, let's get back to
All
your
right.
agenda here.
All right. So look, I'm gonna make this case right now, and then I'm gonna support it with data as best I can.
All right.
So when it comes to the general approach of liberal policymaking versus the general approach of conservative
Okay,
policymaking,
this is an important point that you're about to make. So I want everybody to listen up.
I think in general, liberal policymaking has the express goal of helping people that are less advantaged in society. And generally, that is going to be paid for by people that are more advantaged in society, and I'll just say mostly by wealth. Like,
Okay. I'll agree
and
with you there.
and conservative policy generally is seeking to either preserve systems as they exist, or I mean, no, I'll stop there. It's to preserve systems as they exist right now,
Okay.
or to roll back changes and go back in
So
time
conservatives don't
to
like change. Conservatives don't like change.
yeah, it's
They
basically
like tradition and they don't like change. So in
yeah.
some cases that may mean going
and
back.
and this gets
Whereas
to
liberals like change, but they want to level the playing field. They want to bring up the lower class and the underprivileged, and often that means taxing the people and taking from the people that have.
mhm.
Okay.
And
And go ahead.
I would generally say that if you're going to make a law, you should be trying to help the people that need the most help. And that's why I generally support liberal policies. Now, I will be happy to admit when liberal policies go too far or are harebrained in either writing or execution. But I think that the fundamental goal of liberal policy making is preferable to the fundamental goal of conservative policy making, because a big thing with conservatism is tradition
Yeah,
of we've
I
always
will
done it this way,
listen, I
therefore
will
we should
agree.
continue doing it
I
this
will
way.
agree. Now what you said about liberals to me doesn't paint them in a great light. Basically, taking from the rich, giving to the poor. Okay, that doesn't sound good to me.
That
And
sounds
then
great to me.
also preserving tradition doesn't sound that bad of a thing.
I
Okay.
think that I
Me,
I've thought about this a lot in the last year or two. That the more I think about tradition, the more I'm opposed to it, because like tradition tries to justify itself by using its own argument. Tradition, like the argument for tradition, is like
but then
if you've taken a basic logic course,
why do so many Christians who aren't Christian, or why do so many people who aren't religious celebrate Easter and Christmas? That's tradition.
oh, that's I've got an answer for this.
Okay.
So, like, the answer is because they are fun. Because
Yeah.
it's fun to hide eggs. It's fun to open presents. The
Mhm.
Super Bowl is a tradition. The Super Bowl's fun.
All right.
Like so you
Let's get
but
back to
here's the
let's get
thing.
back
Let me just
we don't have so
introduce
much
some
time.
logic here.
Yeah,
So
yeah. If tradition is fun, people want to do it,
right,
but
but
people like tradition.
so here's the principle that I'm applying to religion. Not to religion, to tradition. Sorry. Is tradition must constantly justify itself with an argument that does not base itself in tradition. Because if the argument for tradition is we've always done it this way, therefore we should continue doing it this way, like that's circumlocution. It's petitio principii.
No,
It's
yeah,
using the
I follow you.
premises to justify the conclusion and using the conclusion to justify the premises.
I feel you there. Let's hit
So,
some actual
but
topics.
like when it comes to Easter and stuff, like Easter can like the traditions of Easter can continually justify themselves because they're fun.
Yeah, which is outside of the cycle that you just discussed.
Right.
Let's talk about some of these things over here you got.
All right. So let's talk about Portland and drugs.
Okay, let's talk about drugs. So my understanding of the liberal agenda on drugs and the conservative side of drugs. Conservatives basically want to make all drugs illegal, and they want you to go to jail for a very long time, depending on the severity of the drug. They're
Real
slowly
quick,
coming around.
your gyp says like they're commercial holidays, not religious.
Well, okay, but they're based in religion, and now it's just tradition, and obviously it's being led by Hallmark,
Well,
effectively.
yeah.
Um,
Don't get me
okay,
started on Hallmark.
so the way conservative liberal look at drugs, conservatives want drugs banned. They want to make them illegal. They want to send you to jail for a long time, depending on the severity of the drug. However,
I'm going to go further. I would say that conservatives often see drug use as a moral failing.
but they are coming around, especially on the marijuana front. However, on the liberal end, liberals want decriminalization of drugs. They want marijuana to be allowed. There's talks to allow cocaine. There's certain areas, Portland, and we'll go there more in a second, that are trying to decriminalize most hard drugs. And
Not trying, had,
well, they
did.
have, yeah. And if you're using drugs, they're trying to allow you more freedom to do so, making so we have safe spaces to do drugs. I don't know if you've ever seen any videos from these places, but it's basically just a large industrial area where people are just look dead, possibly dying. I just remember watching one video thinking like, oh my God, they must constantly be having to check people for pulses or just monitor somebody who sat there for 18 hours and hasn't moved to see if they're alive.
Yeah.
And I can
So
imagine
what
people
you're talking
dying
about
there.
is like harm reduction facilities.
Yeah, and I can imagine people dying there all the time. Now, neither one is forcing treatment on people that are using drugs. Okay,
Well,
and
let's talk
really,
about Portland because
addiction only goes in one direction, and that is the direction of death. Okay, that's it. So let's talk about Portland.
All right. So I believe it was after the
Experiment for
2022 election cycle that Portland passed a law decriminalizing like all drugs. Now there would be quantity limits. So like if you had enough that you were a dealer, like you'd
Yeah.
still get in trouble.
You
But
had to
like,
be a recreational addicted user.
yeah.
And
And
obviously people who do drugs and have addiction problems aren't buying surpluses and thinking that far in advance.
no,
Those with
that's
surpluses are obviously the dealers.
yes.
Oh,
So
we just got shut down, I think. Oh, no, we just got shut down on TikTok for certain ages.
because we're talking about drugs.
Yeah, yeah. Your live contains content and themes that are not appropriate for the young people. All
That's
right.
fine.
All right. I'll accept that. We'll see. And
Okay.
we're on
So
restriction again.
Portland passes the law that decriminalizes all drugs below a certain quantity limit. And the idea was most of these a lot of police officer time was like spent arresting people for small amounts of drugs, people that couldn't afford to like pay the fine, so they just end up in jail clogging up the system, and it wasn't really improving the lives, it was decreasing the capability of police to handle other more pressing matters. And so hey, if
Well,
we
yeah, you
don't
have
have
a drug addict who doesn't have a social security number, doesn't have an ID, doesn't have a bank account. Okay. We're taking these people to jail. They smell disgusting. They're taking time for the police. They end up in court. They don't pay anything, end up back on the streets. And it
it's a
doesn't really
huge
make
drain on the
sense
system
to
for
lock these people up long term.
right. And so the liberal position is, hey, they're draining resources from a system that could be better allocated to more pressing needs.
Okay, but again, about the system being so
Well,
fucked is the
well,
Republicans say, let's throw these people in jail for life. Really, what we need to do is to be forcing rehabilitation on
well,
these.
hold on. So I'm getting there. So if you got if you got caught with, let's say, I don't know, a baggie of heroin in Portland, like instead of being hauled off to jail, you would get basically a traffic ticket for maybe $100 fine or something. And if you showed up to court, you could enroll in some kind of diversion program that would include treatment and stuff like that, and that would get you the fine waived. But what they were finding was that a lot of these people were just not showing up to court and not paying the tickets, and now you've got all these people thinking that they can use drugs just out on the street. So you could be walking down a main street in Portland, and someone's just like trying to find like a vein, and it ended up being like, I would argue, a well-intentioned law that didn't have the resources behind it to help the people that it needed to help, and the consequences of it were just allowing open drug use, and nobody
On the
wants that.
streets. So you just have people dying on the streets because it's
Right.
literally
And
like
so
it could be negative 10 degrees
yeah,
outside
so
and people are barefoot on the
Portland's
side.
gonna be rolling back that law because it didn't go well. And
It was a bad liberal law. But by the way, the pendulum has swung from the 80s and early 90s, right?
the
With
war
Derek and kids off drugs.
congratulations to drugs for winning the war on drugs.
All right, let's move to the next because there's like so much shit I want to talk
Oh,
about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Sasha says same thing with Kensington Ave in Philly. Yeah, that's a famous one.
Philadelphia, yeah, exactly. All right,
All
keep
right.
moving.
So like you could look at environmental protection laws, and you can say like we should be protecting the environment because we can find countless examples where pollution has ruined natural environments and caused harm to people and animals and everything else, and pollution's ugly and pollution's bad, so we need to make sure that we protect the environment. And there are times where it goes too far, and it makes it so that like to just do anything you have to go through endless studies on the environmental impact. And it's a trade-off between how much growth do we want to have versus how much do we want to protect the environment.
Well, and generally, what I hear are stories from the Republican side where you want corporations to basically be able to do whatever they want. And I think maybe my perspective is a liberal bias on this, but you have, from like NPR, but corporations want to do whatever they want, be able to contaminate whatever environments and pollute.
Well,
And
it gets into the concept of externalities.
okay.
So think about, if I have a coal-fired power plant in Ohio, right?
Hmm.
And it's sending soot and all sorts of pollution up there. That's not affecting me in Ohio. You know who it's affecting?
Whoever's downwind from you.
Right. So I'm not the one paying the costs of that pollution. And so you need, like, you have to price in externalities. And that's what a lot of environmental protection is for, is to try and get corporations to actually pay the cost of their externalities. Because a lot of pollution doesn't necessarily have a local effect. And so that's where I'm on the side of environmental protection. But
Sure,
you can
but
think
but
about,
what you're
like,
saying is that environmental protection can go too far and make it impossible to do anything.
so think about like this. Imagine you're a farmer and you've got a whole bunch of irrigation ditches, right? And then like you decide, you know what, I want to plow over this land and build a new farm or something. Well, those irrigation dishes might now be considered wetlands, and now you need to have an environmental study to modify the own land that you have. Like,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
you can look at it and say, okay, that's maybe going a little too far. And so it's all about this balancing act. But I think that in general, the liberal position here is better, which is we should be protecting the environment as opposed to we should just be allowed to build and
But
develop and
the issue
industrialize
is
without
that
consequence.
we're making crazy laws, and that farmer can't just go to a judge, can't ask for an exception with without getting without getting some type of study done. So,
Right, and that's where it can go too far. But I would say that the harms that come from liberal policies going too far are less severe than the harms that come from conservative policies going too far.
well, it maybe in the environmental aspect.
Give me an
Uh,
example where a liberal policy going too far causes more harm than
well,
the opposite.
let's talk about the renter protection laws. Okay, right now there's a bill they're really trying to push in New York State called good cause eviction. Good cause eviction, the name of it would imply that you must have good cause to evict someone. However, it actually really restricts the definition of good cause. So, late payment of rent, no longer good cause to evict. Non payment of rent, in some cases, no longer good cause to evict. Um, there's a whole lot of so I don't know the ins and outs of it anymore, and it's also morphed over the years because they keep trying to shove this law through, but it's not a good one. The laws, again, to circle back, that don't allow you to check someone's criminal history. Don't allow you to do eviction history. Now, also, renters can't pay extra security deposit or prepaid rent if they don't have great credit or don't make enough money to qualify. So basically, those people just get the shaft. They just don't get the apartment because the landlord isn't able to accept extra security to offset the
Yeah.
additional risk that person is.
Well, and
So all those people lose.
this ends up being an economic argument because
Sure, it's economic, but it's also at the cost, to potential renters. It's hurting
well,
these renters.
let's talk about the trade-off that you make when you become a landlord.
We go back to this all the time, but at the end of the day, if you made a trade-off to become a landlord and then the laws changed in the future, and the
That's
law
still
and the
you're
laws that's a trade-off that you couldn't have accounted for. A group of 45 people being bused to Albany to make a bunch of slobbish noise in the halls of Congress, in the halls of the state Congress. Insane to me. Insane.
I
And I
just look at it as you are taking on risk at in exchange for low labor passive income.
I, but the amount of risk continues to increase, and the fact that people are losing their homes, their two-family, their three-family homes, and having to be dragged through this eviction process, I think is insane. Let's move on a little more because we have the media that we're going to talk about. Trust lost in media. We got a whole
Well,
bunch of
you
stuff
know
that
what? All right,
I don't
yeah,
even
let's
see
talk
us
about
getting.
the media then. Let's just because I think that the response that I had to you by
I
text.
I liked it. I don't fully agree with it, but I really like what you said. So go ahead.
All right, so you said here. Um, you said let's talk about crazy legislation and the lack of good factual resources in biased media. And
Okay.
you also said there are no news publications that give just unbiased news. It's growing nearly impossible. And I said, I don't think there's actually a lack of good factual resources. The problem that you think exists is due to the fact that outlets like Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, all these crazy propaganda networks, for lack of a better term, have been allowed into the same space as legitimate news sources. And
Okay,
it's
so
like
name some legitimate news sources. I agree. Sorry, give your P example.
like it's
Which I
they're
like.
they're all in it's they're all in the same pool, and you've got some people that are peeing everywhere. So now people look at the pool and say, well, everyone in there is covered in pee. And instead of asking why shouldn't we make the people that are peeing in the pool leave, we just say, oh, I guess it just isn't possible to find a pool without pee in it.
Everybody must be pissing. So what you're saying is we've allowed some kind of illegitimate news sources into the ring, and now we're just saying that everything going on in the ring is incredible because we have proof that what's happening in the ring is no longer credible. But what I've seen as a huge NPR fan, and I used to listen to CNN and MSNBC, and I've been doing so for the last 2 decades since I was in high school, so more than 2 decades. I've listened to these things on a daily basis. I listen to NPR still almost on a daily basis, although I've really tried to stop because it just puts me in a bad mood from this offset of the day. But I've also from time to time listened to Fox and listened to some conservative outlets because I'm always curious what's being said. I'm always curious the agenda. Now, for a long time, the shit that I've heard on Fox is, to me, I just turn it on. I'm like, people are actually believing this. You can taste the bias, you can taste the spinning in the air as these people speak. Well, that started happening on CNN, MSNBC, and I also hear it on NPR all the time. And that's why I've gotten so fed up with these. It's just literally from the perspective in which the story is being told or the news is being reported has a spin on it. And that's not how I want to hear the news. I just want to hear the news.
I get that, but I think the
I,
fact that you've got the like, and it really is the far right more than the far left in the media space poisoning the rhetoric to the point where now they have called into the question the legitimacy of all news, when most news is still quite legitimate. And here's the thing.
But it's the issue is that it's the spin that is on all of the news. There's no unbiased news source anymore. And
I disagree.
I just want to hear the news. I don't want to hear the opinion of the publication.
You still have plenty of organizations out there that are putting forth fact-based reporting.
Oh, I mean, I'm listening to NPR and not getting it.
The Associated Press is pretty good.
What's happening with Kate Middleton right now?
I could give two shits.
I know, but what I'm saying is every outlet is reporting on it, and that's not fucking news. It's not.
Well, and you know what? And this is something where
shouldn't be
like
news.
Fox News and the like have been really successful, is that they have demonstrated that there is a big market for news that has a open bias to it.
Well, and this is what I think you're missing is that the other end has matched it. And why? Because there is a demand for this.
I would agree that the
It's
other
just-
end is trying to match it. I don't think that they have.
I do, and as somebody who's pretty centrist, it's very palpable from both sides now, and it's
So,
really frustrating.
I want to get your take on this, because a guy that I play pool with is in his mid 60s, was in New York City, moved down to South Carolina, and occasionally we'll get into political discussions.
Mhm.
And he'll make claims that I recognize from my exposure to right wing media. And I recognize those claims as just factually untrue. And when I say to him, hey, what you're saying is not true, and then I go online and I will find studies that have data that support the falsity
Mhm.
of his claims, he just says, well, you can't believe what studies say.
Yeah,
How do you
because
combat
a
this?
study can be designed. So he has a bit of truth in the statements that he's saying. But I think, especially on the right side of things, do you know where this distrust in media came? It started in about 2014.
No, I don't.
Trump.
And that was going to be my guess, but
Yeah, Trump, and this is back when I was listening to a lot of news. There were some things that he said in 2014 and 15 that were just undercutting the legitimacy of the news, and it was
well, and
literally like
it was
playbook.
intentional.
It was intentional, and it was playbook. It was literally right out of the playbook, and this is something that you would see happen in third world countries where everybody is corrupt. And some of it he was right on. I will say he was calling out a lot of establishments for being corrupt and uh, but unfortunately he it was basically like a child throwing a fit. If I can't have my way,
Well,
I'm going to tear everything down.
have you heard this
And that's where
phrase?
we are now.
Have you heard the phrase the Gish Gallop?
No. Yeah, yeah, I have.
It's a rhetorical technique that you use in debate. It's bad faith and bad argument, but it's effective. And basically what you do is you rattle off as many points as you can as fast as you can and with no regard to their accuracy and force the opponent to have to like debunk.
And yeah,
And so like I
and
can
you've
rattle
just
off
changed the
10
entire
falsehoods
narrative
in a
of yeah.
minute and it'll take you 2 to 3 minutes each to say that's wrong for these reasons and that's wrong for these reasons, and I've just had to waste 20 or 30 minutes fighting against your 1 minute's worth of effort.
Can we I want to run one news story I read about this morning by you, and
Go ahead.
I want to kind of get back to our agenda. I'm curious your opinion on this. A wealthy New Jersey town is resisting affordable housing plans. Municipal leaders in New Jersey's one of the richest towns are risking sanctions for pulling out of a plan to build dozens of affordable housing. Let's see, affordable housing, New Jersey 38. So township officials reluctantly agreed years ago to a 75-unit downtown project on Main Street. This is 3 years ago, after their own settlement with the Fair Share Housing. But that set off political backlash and swept in new officials. So basically, the populace of that town was unhappy, and they voted in new people. The new members said the plan calls for too many affordable housing units clustered in one place, and the project doesn't make sense in the community. And the residents were very happy about this, the ones who were in attendance in the town hall. So let's see. What they're saying is the general public in this town doesn't want this affordable housing. They felt like they had been forced into agreeing to build this affordable housing, and they've now voted it down, and they no longer want to do it. So to me, this sounds like democracy. This sounds like the people in the town, the majority, don't want affordable housing. Why should they have to have it? It's their town. They voted against it.
So I'll agree with your sentiment about the democracy thing. However, it is short-sighted on their part because I would imagine that there are a number of service jobs in that area, restaurants and the like,
I
right?
imagine this Main Street probably has some, if it's one of the richest towns, probably has some really classy establishments, nice restaurants, nice bars, nice
Right,
shopping experiences.
but you're
And
gonna
yes, these people will need these places will need people to employ.
right. So you're going to have a whole bunch of businesses that need to employ people at wages that would probably not be high enough for people to purchase housing at the current market price. So the town says, let's build affordable housing so that people can, so that there's more affordable options here. Those are the places that the people that are serving you are going to live. So why would you be against that? Like, to me, it
Well,
sounds
I don't
like
think the town ever said, let's build affordable housing so that we can have people work
no, no,
here.
no, no. That you build affordable housing so that you can bring in more people and you make your town more affordable and more diverse. Like, affordable housing generally leads to more diversity. And I generally think that people that are opposed to affordable housing are against diversity.
So let's leave race out of this. Okay, let's just
I'm
talk
not going
about
to.
affordable housing.
I'm not going to.
And
I think that racism plays a role in this.
now that sounds racist to me to assume that affordable housing means cultural diversity. That means black and brown and Asian people. To me, well, we may be out of time here.
We got to keep on going on this next week then.
All right, so I'm going to pause this. Let me see if I can squeeze in really quick our bar trivia. If we get cut off, we get cut off. 29 seconds remaining. In Hawaii, so Hawaii is one of the hottest states in the United States. You drop a steel ball weighing 5 pounds from a height of 45 inches. 5-pound steel ball. James, don't answer this. Will it fall more rapidly through water at 20 degrees Fahrenheit or water at 40 degrees Fahrenheit in Hawaii? Or will it make no difference? All right, that concludes our live episode. Audio. All right, thank you for joining us. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with our assertions or if you were just an eternal optimist.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.